as we get into down and distance situations. So, for example, these first 2 days are really P and 10, meaning you're just dialing up, every play that is not even a down and distance play. Practice 3, we start to get into some second down. Practice 4 and 5, you start to see a little bit of third down situations. And when we get into that 6th day, you'll start to see a little bit more third down and long, where now you can start to see some play calling that is going to be situated for, the quarterbacks. So it's not going to be until that second kind of rack, if you will, that second week where we start to, pin some plays on quarterbacks.
Chessa Boucher with NBC 33. Yeah. Aside from Keyshawn Butte, you have that loaded wideout room. Is there anybody that kind of you're expecting to have a breakout fall camp?
I'm not just saying this, but to be positive. But I'm Thomas, Neighbors, Hilton. I'd like to see them all, continue to develop because they are young receivers. Those would be the guys in particular. Jenkins has showed some things in spring that we'd like to see him continue to progress in the manner that he has. All those guys are talented, but I really think more than anything else, it's the consistency that we want to see from those guys, that they do it, play in and play out, and actually practice in and practice out. So consistency and performance is really what we're looking for with that group. If we get that, it'll be a dynamic group.
Yeah, Brian, are there any players who, who can't go full speed in practice right now or can't take part in drills? And also, Trey Bradford's status, didn't see him on the roster.
Yeah, Trey has been separated from the university, and that's, there are Buckley, laws that I can't get into some specifics there, but he is no longer on the roster. As it relates to practice, Besh is limited. He's coming back, I think he's making the progress necessary from shin splints, and I think he'll be, available for us in the next couple of days. But he's really the only one that has the kind of limitations. I think Tolan, had the discectomy. He's making great progress. Those would be the two guys that are kind of on a pitch count, if you will, if that's, if I can use that phraseology in terms of they're coming along, but they're not quite there yet, but they've made pretty good progress.
Hey, Coach Kelly, Glenn West with Go247. Just Jarek Bernard-Converse, we saw him out there, I think, for the first time since he's joined the program. Just update, I guess, on his status and just how important it is for the secondary, particularly that cornerbacks group, to kind of develop some cohesiveness in these first several weeks of camp.
Yeah, if I have my notes in front of me, it's one of the things I talked about in our offensive and defensive staff meetings, probably 2 or 3 times about trying to gain some continuity at the cornerback position. So getting him back, getting him out here, he's been a great leader for us. And, we're anxious to see what he can do. Obviously had a great career at Oklahoma State. We expect that to continue here. I had a good summer. He's healthy. And he's played a lot of football. So the expectations are that he's going to impact what we do. But now I think the big thing here is to gain some continuity at that, that position. And that's why we went into the transfer portal and feel very fortunate to have him.
Hey, Coach. Bree Andrews, LSU Tiger TV. With John Emery being able to come back this season, Armani Goodman be able to come back, how would you describe, the depth in the running back room and how that's really come together? And is there anybody there that's really stood out to you?
Not yet. I mean, they're all going to have a great chance, to contribute. I really like the depth of the group. You add, Kane to that mix as well. And I think, all of them have a chance to contribute, much like we saw in the spring game where we had a lot of guys contribute. I think that's going to be probably what happens here this year, and I'm okay with that. I think that's great. I mean, I think all of them are very competitive and all bring a little bit something different to the table. but all will contribute in some fashion.
Brody Miller with the Athletic. Martinez, Dellinger, two guys who've kind of cross-trained a good bit. I guess where are they kind of mainly focusing on right now in the line, and where could they be used?
Yeah, that's a good question. Brad and I were kind of, having a conversation about it even during practice, because there's a lot of moving parts there with, Dellinger's at guard. We want to see him at center a little bit. You saw Frazier at guard with Bradford, but, Frazier could play tackle as well. And so we've paired them up on the right side because we think that they're interchangeable. We like the fact that Bradford's got really good feet, but, Frazier's got some length. So long story short, as it relates to the specifics of your question, those guys you're going to be center guard combinations right now. But I think it's important that there's some flexibility here for the first 2.5 weeks. And we'll build, the starting five, and then, finding the rotation, where you have, your tackles solidified, the center position, and then I think we've got some really good depth, that's building in this unit. But I think it's going to take a little while for it to kind of pan out over the next couple of weeks.
Hey, Coach, Jace Lejeune from Gridiron Football. I know you signed a really talented transfer portal class. Talk about just trying to get those guys accumulated to the program and also getting the veterans their reps as well.
Yeah, so we kind of went through that in the spring, because most of those guys were here as it relates to the transfer portal. So they assimilated very well, they fit in very well, and they got a lot of work in the spring, and then had a really good summer. So I would say that in itself has kind of already played itself out, and they've immersed themselves into the program and are seen now as one, in terms of the program themselves. So, whether it's a wide receiver or whether it's a running back, obviously Kane is new to the program, but other than that, everybody is kind of assimilated quite well back into the program.
Hey, Coach, of the guys who weren't here this spring, I'm kind of curious who sort of stepped up today, and it seems like they were here during the spring even though they weren't.
I don't know that there was anybody that particularly, we hadn't seen Seven before. Seven Banks, obviously he was out here today in a little bit of a limited fashion. But, obviously, having Perkins out here today, you get a flash and see him. I was over watching tackling drills, and, he's got a suddenness to him, that's quite different than some of the other players. So I think there's a couple of players that kind of flash at you. I like the way Bordelon moves around, athletic. He's a big, strapping kid that moves well. Emery, the local kid from Catholic, Emery Jones, he's a big physical kid too. So those guys kind of jump out at you a little bit, that they look more than just, the typical, freshman coming in. These guys are physically mature and handle themselves, very well.
Okay. Over here, Brett Martell with the AP out of New Orleans. Could you compare maybe relative to, longer stretches in your career where you had relative, coaching staff and roster stability, just how you feel about the amount of decisions that a mostly new staff here has to make about a roster with a lot of new players between now and week one?
It's a good question. And I think it's been answered by the way these questions have been posed as to whether it's the offensive line, which I said, I think, be patient, the quarterback position, the cornerback position. I think that those three critical areas, right? Corners, offensive line, and quarterback. you know, a lot of good and bad things happen in those units, and there's questions that have to be answered. Now, I stand here in front of you feeling pretty good about the players that we've put together in a very short order that can go out and play at a high level in the SEC, but the fact of the matter remains, we got to figure out who those guys are. And so we're going to go through camp and you know, have to make some tough decisions and quite frankly, rely on evaluations in camp to do that, and that's a little bit different in my years. Generally, we've had guys kind of, you know, everyone says the depth chart, it's always open, but, you know, you always have a guy penciled in somewhere. There's not a lot of penciling in yet. So, yes, to your questions, there's some work to be done.
Coach, Leah Van, the Advocate. Traditionally, the number 18 has been very special to this team. Are you looking to continue that tradition, and when do you hope to find a player to wear that jersey number?
Yeah, I think the tradition is real and needs to continue. I've talked to the team about it. They believe in it as well. It's, you know, we believe that number represents somebody that brings all the traits every day. If 7 is the most talented player from the state of Louisiana, we think that 18 is the one that brings all those traits that come to that player that leads in an extraordinary manner. You know, the attention to detail, you know, just a great focus, represent your program in a positive way, both in the classroom, in the community, you know, on the field. And so that's kind of what 18, you know, means, and it's important. And so we're going to award it to a deserving player. We're just not going to do that today. But it's coming. Stay tuned. I think you guys will show up. Thank you. Appreciate it.